Good afternoon to you, Mr. Beanie.
Good afternoon, Ray.
I'm happy to be here. And like I usually say, I go by the name Akim Baba for this show. And I'm happy to have you here. As most viewers, they may not know that you are like my brother, you know. But we are not going to talk about brotherly stuff right now. I'm going to engage with you in terms of what is affecting the entire world currently, in terms of talking about the issue of Russia and Ukraine. Then we'll go a little bit further to do a deep dive to Africa scope of it, and as well as when it comes to democracy in Africa. And we can talk about various things about Africa in in general. So without wasting much of your time, I would like you to introduce yourself.
Oh, wow. That's first of all, it's an honor to be on your stage today. I want to say I'm really happy for the invitation. This is a good initiative that you started, and I hope that you keep pushing and this can become something big. Um, a really seldom or random, seldom actually, we get to have areas for African intellectuals living in the diaspora, and most importantly in America, to have a stage to speak. Uh, to share their opinion, their ideas on various topics. And I think this can be a way for us to create that stage for African intellectuals living in diaspora. I am Kwadwo Bini. I'm originally from the Ivory Coast, West Africa. I've been living in the state. Next year is going to be 10 years that I've lived in the States. Um, I'm passionate of politics, culture, um, I really love spending time learning about different culture, different politics, geography around the world, and all that stuff. And my professional trade is cybersecurity and information security. I am a cybersecurity professional in the banking industry. So this is a little bit background on me, and I'm more than happy to go on these topics that you have set up for us today. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. It's a great privilege to have you seated here today. We all know how American system is. We hardly have time for other things beside work, 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 work. So I am honored to have you here. We know it takes a lot of a devotion to dedicate your time for such a short notice for this show. But we're going to dive quickly into the subject matter, and the subject matter can go any various ways. Is a broad issue, and I first of all want us to look at the issue of Russia-Ukraine war. Um, what can you say about that? Is it a necessary war, or uncalled for war is unnecessary, or what do you think about the war in general?
Um, my opinion on it is primarily from a position of African. As an African, I have my opinion on all that stuff. Um, if you ask me the same question in the different settings, maybe as an American, we have different objectives than Africa. My answer can be different too. But I'm gonna talk about it from a pure African perspective. As an African, um, I think it was not necessary at all. I think the escalation between both parties was not necessary. I think the matter at stake right now could have been easily resolved through diplomacy and discussion. But I think is a matter of ego on both sides. So no one want to give up. So basically, the most powerful will flex their muscle until they win. And it's unfortunate because I mean, if you happen to know that you're not powerful, sometimes Diplomacy is the key. It's not to put the life of millions of people at stake because of your ego. Um, Things like that have happened in the past where you were resolved in diplomacy, discussion. Quid pro quo, as they call it, the quid pro quo. I give you this in order to get that, and we all at peace in return. That's how the world has always worked. Matter of fact, if you go back in history, every single war that were fought with thousands of people, millions of people dying, it was always resolved through a quid pro quo or a sort of diplomatic understanding at the end. So if we know that, why didn't we just jump to the end? Why did we have to escalate it on both sides to get to the point that it is today?
Hmm.
That's my perspective as an African. That's what I think about the war as an African.
Okay, that's interesting. That's an interesting way to look at it. I do agree with diplomacy, using diplomacy to resolve the issue. Um, so I believe there was a time, I can't remember the exact year, whereby Russia also had this issue with Ukraine. And I think Obama was in position of power then as the president of America. And there was an issue of the Crimea location. And Russia ended up, I think, taking over that location. Basically, if that was one of the way out that I think President Obama resolved that issue at that time. Um, and now here we are again. Is Russia looking for another territory? What is your take on that?
Oh, you're asking my take on if they're looking for another territory.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what geopolitics is about. Big nations always fight war if it's not for oil, it's for territory or power. Russia is not a third world country, it's a big nation. It's number 11 as far as GDP in the world. Behind a lot of Western countries today, it's number 11. It's the second biggest military power in the world. I mean, Russia is, I don't want to put it that way, but it's not just a small country in West Africa that can just be under the dictate of France or any other countries. It's a big power. Russia sits at the seat of UN Security Council as one of the veto owning members between United States, Russia, and all that. So this is big power fighting big war among themselves. It's always about land, oil, gas, natural resources, or those kind of things. Anybody that would come up and say, "Oh, it's about sovereignty, it's about freedom of speech," all that stuff, it's a fallacy, in my opinion. It's a fallacy. Sometimes when even as us as human, we're not even talking about big powers. Sometimes when we have certain goals, we put some small thing out there as to embellish it so that when the public sees it, they think, oh, okay, that's what they think. Meanwhile, we have our hidden agenda into it. And that's how all the war in the world, whether it was fought or initiated by the US, by Russia, by China, Middle East, it's always like that. There is always that big picture in the front about sovereignty, freedom of speech, and so on. And then when you come to find out, there is more hidden reason in it. Do Russia want to land? Yes. I think that's not news. They have made it clear since the beginning. They has made it clear since 2014 when Obama was there. So I don't understand why people are surprised today when they are moving with force to get it. This is nothing new. They've made the objective clear as far as the land of Ukraine, how they think it should be. Again, you go back to the first question you ask, two big powers fighting over things. How you solve it is a quid pro quo. You sit down, you discuss it, and resolve it. It's simple as
Hmm.
that. It's not the first time it happened in history. Russia tried to put their weapon in Cuba. United States had an issue with that. They sat down, they discussed it, they took their weapon out, and it was resolved. I don't understand why we can't do the same thing this time again. No one at the time cared about sovereignty of Cuba, or it was a it was an independent country. It had freedom of speech, whatever it is. It's a war or it's a power struggle between two big power. They know how to solve it. We just happen to be the ones suffering from it today. We are not sitting at those table of discussion. That's the way
Hmm,
I look at it.
that's
Unfortunately,
interesting.
the Ukrainian people are the ones suffering because they are being
Exactly.
manipulated on both sides.
Exactly. I mean, there's been a lot of killings, a lot of murdering in Ukraine. As far as even civilians, innocent people, uh, they are the one actually getting more of the pile of the whole situation. Um, but it seems like NATO is another big player in this issue, and we can go about talking about the NATO, how they came about after the world wars, and coming as an alien to and as an ally to resolve things like this. And it seems like since Ukraine is not part of NATO yet, NATO is a little bit restrained or to what they can do and what they cannot do. And on the other hand, sometimes they have over exercised their power, the NATO, as we may say. Um, it looks like they also have their own interest, hidden interest when it comes to resolving issues like this. By and large, we're going to have to a little bit digress into Africa because the main reason why we are here is to have an Africa centric. Currently, Russia is aggressively, penetrating Africa region, and the way they go about it, as far as I can tell, is not about investment, which is like most of the times what other countries usually use to get into Africa. Or focus on investment, into Africa or supplying some aid or through religion and all those stuff to penetrate Africa. But in this case, Russia have succeeded in having their big foot in Eastern Mediterranean region of Africa, of the Red Sea in Africa. And they have also succeeded in using that as an opportunity or avenue to extract some when it comes to natural resources of Africa. What is the relationship between Africa and Russia? And in order for you to sum the relationship, if you can explain a little bit of history between Russia and Africa, and in the future, what the relationship should be like.
Well, first, I have an issue with the way it's framed. When you say extract African resources, that means that you're giving the impression, or we are giving the impression, that Russia just pick up the military, went in Africa, saw some land, start digging, took oil, and left. As if
No,
we don't have governments in those countries and ministers and intellectuals that sat down with both parties and negotiated a contract for exportation.
okay, I
So
will excuse myself.
when
I
you
will
frame
excuse
it
my
like that, it it sounds like Russia just happened one day, pick up, went to Africa, start digging, kill
no,
everybody that was there,
no, they
extracted
did not
everything, and
do
they are
that.
leaving.
They did not do that. I would like to readdress that statement. Russia did not just go to Africa and extract natural resources. Russia, basically, their strategy is to work with the Africa elite, Africa leaders, and be able to have a security foothold in place like Africa and have an exchange with like mercenary arms and some dealings with Africa as like older days trade by barter, whereby I give you this, then you give me that. And it's not just
Okay.
Russia that just goes to Africa and try to extract. They are, of course, they are working with African leadership. And we'll come back to this later when it comes to African leadership, because one of our biggest challenges is the corrupt leadership of Africa. I am one of the firm believers that colonial masters or the Westerners are not the problem of Africa. Our leaders are the problems of Africa, regardless of their influence. I'm one of those believers that believe that. So, but to go back to the question, when it comes to the relationship of Africa and Russia, how would you place it? Is it to Africa advantage or is to Russian advantage? Or if you
Um,
don't mind, you can just speak generally on the relationship of Africa and Russia.
um, Clearly, it's going to be in the advantage of both parties because a nation doesn't just pick up and go into another country, negotiate contract if they're planning on losing. This is not free money or this is not voluntary job. In fact, the United States, France, Great Britain are all over Africa, not for humanitarian causes, it's for profit. One of the biggest agro-industrial complex in Africa, especially Western Africa, is owned by Nestle, which is a Sweden company, Nestle.
Yes.
So they are not there doing a humanitarian job. They are exploiting African resources in counterparty for jobs and paying taxes, so on and so forth. It's again no different than what Russia is doing. Now, as opposite to Western countries, Russia has not been in that game in Africa for as long as the Western has been there. So over the past 20 years, if you want to say, or 15 to 20 years, that's when they are starting having more interest into it. China also is another part because China is actually investing heavily too into
Yes.
African countries. Their strategy is mostly to invest in infrastructure and all that stuff. In exchange for what? Well, it's in exchange sometimes for land, in exchange for mineral resources, bauxite, all those kind of things. Because guess what? China is the manufacturing country of all the Western countries today. Cell phones, everything you want today, China is where it's made. But China get those natural resources from where? From those African countries that they are in a relationship with, extract the bauxite, the manganese, and all that stuff, coltan, bring them to China, transform them, start making those cell phones. Western countries go in China, take those cell phones, come and sell them in America, France, and now you have apples. So it's a chain. It's a chain. It's no different, and it goes back to the first thing. It's interest, big nation interest. I give you this in order to get that. Until us Africans understand that, and we think it's always about kumbaya lie and emotion and all that stuff, and oh, I deserve this. Why are you doing that? We will be doomed. We need to understand that it's about interest. It's about power. Um, so it's the same thing that Russia is doing. Russia, on the other end, they might not have the same advantage as a country like China, but one big thing they have is military and those kind of things. That's what they're known for. Weapons, those kind of things. So they're exchanging the military advancement, the military technological advancement, weaponry, and all that stuff, and all those aircraft and all that, Sukhois, these kind of things, with African countries which are known to lack in those areas in exchange for natural resources and all those things. It's the same thing. So historically speaking, when you look at the history of colonization in Africa, if you go back in history, as far as I'm concerned, I don't remember a country that was colonized by Russia.
Yeah, there was a reason for that though.
No, wait a minute. You asked me a question. Let me finish my
Yeah.
question. You are
Okay.
not the one interviewed today. You are interviewing today.
Okay.
As far as whether there is a reason or not, as far as I'm concerned, there was I don't remember a country that was colonized back
By
in
Russia.
Africa by
Yes.
Russia or the Soviet Union. What I remember though is almost all the independent leaders of Africa were supported through either weapon or some sort of thought by the Soviet Union by Russia at the time. Whether you go from the Cote d'Ivoire, Ufo and all that stuff, and the RDA was a big West African political movement that was founded by former West African intellectuals. And the movement went from Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Mali, Togo. It was a big, we call it RDA, Rassemblement Démocratique Africain, African Democratic Rassemblement, and it encompassed a lot of intellectuals. That movement, when they were pushing for independence in West Africa most of the time, a good portion of them were pro-Soviet Union because at the time, West African countries were colonized by French and the West.
Yeah.
So what I remember is the Soviet Union and all and the people on the eastern side were the ones that were supporting those leaders that wanted independence. If you fast forward in South Africa with the apartheid war, Mandela has had multiple interviews where he had mentioned the people that supported his causes. So when I put all of that in, let's say I have two baskets,
Mm.
and then I am to put what they did for us into us versus what the West did for us into us. It's unfortunate, but I'm gonna have to go on the side of the Soviet Union, the Russians, because I can feel the same way toward them versus the others. So that's what I can say to that. Now, this is not to say that the Soviet Union, the Russians are clean like what stuff. No, because they also had the colonial in Middle East and all that stuff. That's where they were focused and all that stuff. But since we are in the world of interest, as an African, my interest happened to be on the side of the West, not on the side of the West, because history has shown that they have been the one for our causes when we were fighting our colonizers.
Interesting. Well, you have a very good, valid point, and it's true that Russia never colonized any country in Africa. And I'm not going to elaborate on the reason why, but the fact is the fact. They did not. Um, it's a matter of interest, you said. What is Africa interest? What would you say is the interest of Africa?
Africa interest right now should be fully independent. We need to have the independence to self-govern ourselves. We need to have the power to decide for our own self, whether it's from a currency standpoint, it's from a natural resources standpoint, it's from a political standpoint, which maybe we can talk about it later in our democracy discussion. Um, we need not to be taught what to do anymore because the reality is what the Western thought it was to be the right thing for us to do has failed us since Independence Day. So I think it's time for us to trace our own destiny, our own route, our own take our own future in our hand. Any country that is in that vision, any country that is interested into helping us achieve that vision would rightfully so be our partner. And in that for that matter so far, China hasn't shown to be opposed to that. Russia has shown to be in support of that. But every time we have a leader that is going there, and we've seen come time and time again the Western creating coup d'etat in Africa against those leaders that want to do that. So that's why today you are seeing a sentiment into a lot of Africans that is more pro Russia, China, and those other things because we're just looking at facts, and we feel like these people have been the one aligned with our goal as far as being independent fully.
Talking about Russia and China, I want to dive in a little bit into China. Some people, Africans, will argue that China does not really mean well for Africa based on some record in some countries whereby they have investment in those countries. Some countries they even help them to build the airports and they confiscated the airport when they could not meet up to the loans. They have some investment in some countries, and the people, the indigenous of that country, are not allowed to work in those factories. They maltreat the indigenous of the country. What would you say about that? Because you mentioned China has
Okay,
not
what I
been
can
real.
say about that is you mentioned earlier that you don't have an issue with the Westerners. Your issue is
No, I
with
do have an issue with the Westerners.
what
Obviously,
maybe I guess you just
I,
changed, but
I
you
no,
told
the
you
point,
said
no, the point I was trying to make there was I do not want excuse from our leaders or excuse from Africa as a general to use Westerners, whether their influence or their corruption, to give excuse of Africa not moving forward.
can I finish my point then?
Yeah,
So as you mentioned, you again the point you were trying to make is the Western countries are not a problem. Our leaders were the problem.
yes, because everything that comes,
So that's the same
everything,
thing.
everything that happens in Africa, I just want let me answer the question real quick.
Well, you asked me the question, you can't answer your own question.
No, 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 this is not the question I ask you. What I
You asked
ask
me
you,
what I was thinking about those
China. So,
treatments and
yeah,
those things that China did, right?
yes, yes.
And I want to answer that, and then you can
Okay,
add to it.
okay.
So what I think of that again, as you mentioned in your example, it wasn't an excuse that our leaders were giving by putting the fault on the Westerners, right? It's the same concept. It is all they're saying might have happened. That's true. But one key word that you said, for example, was what? When they defaulted on the payment of the airport, they seized it. Whose fault is it if they default on it? Our leaders or China?
Of course, our leaders.
If again a country comes and signs treaties with leaders, and after those treaties, you are giving them land where they can do anything that they want by themselves. We are not allowed to go there and all that stuff. Whose fault is it?
Again, it comes to me not blaming the Westerner.
Exactly.
It's
So
our
for that
leaders.
matter, it's the same thing. For that matter, the problem, if you ask me, is not China.
So,
The
would you
problem
say the
is our
problem is
leaders.
Westerners when it comes
No, the
to?
problem is our leaders, right?
Okay, yes,
So whether we do trade with China, with America, with France, UK, or India, we need to have our own interests at the center of that trade. Until we understand that as Africans, and we are signing away things without having our own interests and protect our own interests, it will be the West, it will be Russia, it will be China, or any other country that will take advantage of us. Because, one more time, this is not a kumbaya word about emotions and whatsoever. We are talking about real world issue. We are talking about resources. We are talking about power. We're not talking about a neighborhood game. Countries have interests and they will do anything across to protect them. And if our leaders cannot understand that and think everything lightly, we all will be doomed. Whether the relationship is with Russia, with the United States, with the UK. It's as simple as that. So if that's what I can say to that. Um, one more thing. When you ask what should be in for Africa, for example, when we ask for independence, we ask for independence, but we're not asking for exclusivity, meaning to have an exclusive partnership with one country and that's it. That's not what we're asking for. We are asking for the right for our own self to say, let's say today we need to build a 4 lane left and right highway from Lagos all the way to Senegal, so that you can drive your car today from Lagos, go to Mali, Senegal, Mali, Burkina, all that stuff, all the way there. We need to sit down our own self in Africa and say, okay, who are the contract that can bid for that? Whether it's a Chinese company, it's an American company, it's a French company, it's a South African company. Bid, we analyze it. If the Chinese win, they build it, period. We don't need to have any other influence power grabbing from the left, from the right. If it's the French that won the contract, they win it. If it's the Swedish, they win it, and that's it. And unfortunately, today that's not how things work in Africa because we have corrupt leaders, or we have leaders that are influenced by either the West or China or whatever it is. And that's where the problem is. The problem is not with a single country.
Yes, that's another point, and I was going to talk about or ask you a question about the issue of dealing with the outsiders, such as China, Westerners, even America, and what have you. One of the biggest challenges that I've seen in Africa is they can move from country to country. The Westerners or the Chinese or the Russians or even American, if they can get what they want in this country, natural resources, they can move from that country. If they could not cause war or unrest, or they could not influence what is going on, they can move to another country and they can get it from that country based on what that country lacks. If they provide what the country lacks with, again, corrupt leaders, they will accept it. So the question is, how can Africa come together as one to control our own resources and make sure that our resources control put into consideration every countries and citizens of Africa before those natural resources or mineral resources is being given out to outsiders? Or wouldn't it be better if we can use those mineral resources within Africa and for Africa alone? What is your take on that in terms of that challenges? Because sometimes we are not in the corridor of power when it comes to um, leadership. Some of them do face those challenges of dealing with these foreigners and investors, knowing the fact that if they can't give them what they want, they're going to go to a neighboring country and get it from there. In that case, the Westerner or the foreigners, they have a bargaining power. What is your take on that?
Well, I want to say maybe the solution to that is having a African a federation of African countries, um, just like how we have in the United States. We have a federation. It's a federal country. Um, every single state have their own law. By the end of the day, once it comes national interest, it's the federal law that is above everything. Maybe that's where we need to move toward as Africans. Um, is it going to be easy? Definitely not. Because whenever you start talking about a system like that, I mean, you start talking about one unique currency. And then if you start throwing that into the game, then you start talking about the side of economies of every single country in that federation and all that stuff. Um, it's not going to be an easy task. Then also you throw in the other picture, if you start thinking about that, I mean, you have one big federal military army power, whereby if there is an issue in Cote d'Ivoire, you can activate that federal military power to come in and solve it or to stop it or whatnot. Um, the ramification is big. So I don't know if that will happen soon. I think that will be the ideal solution. Until we get there, we will just have to fight to have uncorrupt leaders at the head of our countries. You know, have to fight to have leaders that actually have the country interest at heart. Because the thing that we are asking is really not hard.
Yep.
It's not hard at all. I give the example of the road. I'll give another example. Let's say today, Cote d'Ivoire is known for cocoa. Ghana is also known for cocoa trade. I think Nigeria, you guys have cocoa there too, right?
Yes.
Cocoa, you trade and all that stuff.
Yes.
So in West Africa alone, these are three bigger producers of cocoa in the world. Now, who are the biggest consumer of cocoa product in the world? Is the West,
West,
starting with
Switzerland.
Switzerland,
Switzerland.
France, the United States, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
We need to have leaders that are willing to sit at a table and say, here is the thing that will benefit all three of us countries as producer of cocoa. Because at the end of the day, we have the same realities. When you go to Lagos or to Abidjan today, the problem that you face in Abidjan, you face them in Lagos, you face them in Accra. The transportation issue, you will face them. The road lack of road or infrastructure, you face the same exact issues, different dynamic, but it's the same issue that we all have. So why don't we sit down, define our issues, define common goals when it comes to cocoa exploitation, create laws and rules so that if an investor come in Cote d'Ivoire, he faces the same rules when he goes to Ghana, when he goes to Nigeria, when he goes to so on and so on. Why is that hard to do? I don't understand. That's as for cocoa. We can have the same thing for palm nut tree oil thing. Palm nut tree produced in Cote d'Ivoire, it is produced in Ghana, it is produced in Nigeria. We can do the same thing for that. When you move on to that, you go for oil. They succeeded to do that for oil. Today we have OPEC countries. Guess what? Oil prices going up in the United States because of who? Because of OPEC countries. Guess who is one of the countries part of OPEC countries? Gabon. You have Gabon
Yeah.
and all those Middle Eastern countries, small countries. But they were able to sit down at the table and say, look, all of us, our economies depend on these particular natural resources. Here is how we can treat it to have leverage as a group. When COVID, everything started reopening and the war in Ukraine started, they tried to put pressure on OPEC to increase the production. They said, no, we are good right now because that's what is benefiting their own economy.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
how we need to start moving. So until maybe we can have that African Union, maybe we can start having some sort of African unity into around certain specific industries. That way we can move together. It's one step at a time, one step at a time. That can be another solution.
I
I mean, there
agree.
is multiple way to go about it, but it's I think what we lack is a will. The ideas are there. We have intellectuals, we have people that studied, but we don't have a will to make the change. That's what's lacking.
Well, I know Africa is not at the level that they should be yet. We still have a very long way to go. But I think they are also moving, Africans is also moving towards the right direction. I think the biggest challenge is lack of good leadership. For example, they just came up with this uh, Africa Continental Free Trade Area. You know, that was a very big move, from different Africa countries. And you talked about maybe they need to come together in terms of industrialization, when it comes to different industries coming together and said, let's have a policy for this type of industry. Let's have a policy for gold, mineral resources. Let's have a policy for cocoa. Let's have a policy for pancane or palm. Let's have a policy for rubber plantation. Let's have a policy for zinc for different type. And with that, later on, we'll be able to merge them together. Or we can also have a policy like the way when we talk about the Eastern Africa, the Southern Africa, the Central Africa, the Western Africa. You know, they can also come together and have such a policy. But let's dive into democracy. One of the our famous musician, uh, which is Fela Anikolapo Kuti, He's also known as Baba 70. Fela was a great man, a great musician. He was the founding founder of Afrobeat music, which is played around the globe now. Fela was imprisoned many times during
Mhm.
his days, and he also went to exile in Ghana due to the military regime and again bad leadership. Fela quoted, he said, and I quote, that democracy is a demonstration of grace, is a crazy demonstration. Fela was a great Pan Africanist. He believed in the same principle that Nkrumah believes, which some people call Nkrumahnism. It's right on the screen what Nkrumah believed of the idea of what the new Africa should be like, independent and absolutely free from imperialism, organized on a continental scale, founded upon the conception of one and united Africa. Now, the question is democracy. Is democracy good for Africa? Is democracy still the best type of governance in the world? Can
Yep.
you set into democracy in Africa?
It's really good question, really good topic of discussion. I have this especially concept of democracy. I have been reflecting on it for the especially for if you want to say for the past 6 months. I've been reflecting on it because in West Africa there was three major things that happened recently, and it went unnoticed. Three coup d'état in three neighboring countries all at the same time within 6 months.
Yeah,
It started well. Mali has started around 2020. They had a coup d'etat there. They had a president. After the coup d'etat, they came together with someone that's supposed to manage the transition, and he ended up not delivering because there is terrorism in northern Mali and all that stuff. So recently, I think last year, he was dismissed. The military took power because they were the one that did the coup d'etat anyway. They're like, we're gonna manage it ourselves because you are fucking up the thing. Next door, Burkina Faso, they had a president, they had a coup d'etat, military took power. And after that was Guinea, same thing, military took power. Within the last 6 months, all that happened, right? So as I was thinking about all these things, I was thinking about coup d'etat, the causes of coup d'etat, and I was looking on, especially on the Western channels, everybody was talking, was so focused on democracy. We want rule of the people, democracy, we want democracy, and blah blah blah. And I was appalled that no one even cared to ask why it was happening. No one even cared to actually dive into the matters to understand why are these happening. And I've realized one thing: democracy, as it was applied in Africa, most importantly in former colonies of the Western countries, is wrong. It was a fallacy. It wasn't a good version of democracy. It was basically manipulated to give to us so that imperialist countries, especially the colonizer, can still have their hand into our matters. Because why I think that there are countries in Africa that are good democracy and it works great. If you go, for example, in South Africa, it's a democracy country with um, a parliamentary system. I don't never heard that there was a coup d'etat there. Even
well,
next door, even next door to us. Um, in Nigeria. When was the last time you guys had a coup d'etat?
Well, I think that was long ago.
Exactly.
Um,
I've never said you never had it. I said when was the last time you guys had a coup d'etat?
well,
You have.
the real democracy probably started around 1990 or
Mhm.
1999, if you ask me, because that was when the real democracy started in Nigeria, where President Obasanjo came into position as a president. Um, Ever since we had a little bit of democracy, but it was military as the head of state. Then
Mhm.
the states are democracy are civilians, you know. But
But
it's been
but
a very long time since the coup.
exactly. I want to finish with this. So again, with my the democracy that they brought us in Africa was truncated. It was manipulated with the goal of the Westerners to still have their hands into our internal affairs. Because we always say democracy, the country that we look at, democratic countries are what countries? The Western countries, France, United States, UK, and all that stuff. But when you look at all those systems that are so good, the power is actually into the hand of the people because that's what democracy is, the will of the people, by the people, for the people. That's the definition. Le pouvoir du peuple, par le peuple et pour le peuple.
Yeah.
If you apply that definition of democracy into actual laws that gives the power to the people, you will not have coup d'etat. You will not have all those things you have because the people will have a way to express themselves when they feel like you are not doing the good job as a president. And when they don't have a way to express themselves, when they feel like you're not doing a good job as a president, it's either by fire or by force, which is coup d'etat. Democracy is not because it's not the fact of changing president every year, every 5 years. That's not democracy. In Germany, they had the chancellor there for how many years, how many terms? Germany is known to be a good democracy, but how long has the chancellor been in power there? It doesn't
The
bother
last
anybody.
the last chancellor,
Yeah, the lady that left.
I think she probably spent like 12 years, if I'm not mistaken.
More, I think she went for 3 terms.
Three times, yeah.
And the reason why she
12 years.
didn't go again it was because politically things were changing, and I think she knew she wasn't winning. If she won, she
Yeah.
gonna win, and she's gonna win again.
Yeah, I mean, three times, like four
Yeah.
years. I think it was like 12 years,
Um,
if I'm not
I'll
mistaken.
finish with this. In
Yeah.
Western countries, then the democratic system for it to work, the people need to have a way to dismiss or to get rid of the political elite if they are incompetent. In the United States, it exists in the Constitution. Matter of fact, it was almost used this in 2020 when they were thinking that Trump was unfit. They were going to dismiss him. In UK, in the Constitution, when they decided that they didn't like European Union, they went to the Parliament, they voted for Brexit, they left, and that was it. Theresa May at the time was the Prime Minister. She was dismissed. Boris Johnson became president. End of the story. In South Africa, good democracy. When after Thabo Mbeki, Jacob Zuma took power, he was with all those allegations of sexual thing and all that stuff. Country was going downhill. They went to the parliament. The parliament voted. They dismissed him. We didn't have needed a coup d'etat because the people again had a way for them to express themselves if they're not happy with the president. In West African countries, most importantly in the Francophone speaking countries, we do not have a way to dismiss a president democratically when we are not happy with him. So we are given a failed democratic system that gives us no choice when we don't like the president or he's not doing the will of the people. And that is not democracy. So when you create the will of the people, you need to have a way for the people to express themselves. And until we have an equitable system for the people, by the people, you won't have a good democracy in Africa.
So when you talk about democracy, There's the constitution of the country that back the democracy, where the constitution written by the Westerners, because I believe it is from the constitution that they will enact a law to either resign the president if it's not going according to the will of the people, or does
Okay,
that fall under democracy as an umbrella?
the constitution is not a democratic principle or tool. In the monarchy, they have constitutions there in other things. So the fact of having a constitution doesn't make you a democracy. Um, that's one. That's the one thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is major, and I'm speaking from West Africa perspective. Most importantly, Francophone West Africans. All of our constitutions, when were they written? In the 1960s, when we all having independence.
I think some of them, I think Nigeria had a different constitution in 1999.
No, those are amendment. You change, you add
Yeah,
something,
yeah,
but all of them, the foundations were in the 1960s at the
yes,
age of our independence.
yes.
We all know the conditions in which we all got our independence. It was pressure movement left and right. Matter of fact, at the time, we didn't have even big elite intellectuals. It was pressure movement left and right. Soviet Union, the West, Eastern versus the West. Things were moving. The world was moving. They had to give us some sort of freedom. The country that were strong enough to fight it had it. Example, like Ghana, for example, or maybe Nigeria and all that. Some countries negotiated it, so on and so forth. Some were given it. Either way, it wasn't written with our intellectuals by themselves sitting at the table. We knew that the colonial master at the time had to agree with it.
So, can I ask,
Now,
can I interject before you continue?
so let me finish it. Let me quick.
Okay.
So again, once you have that kind of system in place, and over the past 60 years, I'm taking the case of Ivory Coast, for example. We've had amendment in 1999. We had another one in 2016, and we had another one in 2020. That's the thing that you go and change the constitution. How old do you need to be a president? Whether you need to be that age. They don't even change core fundamental issues because again, they only change it when they want to block one candidate to be president, or if they feel like maybe this need to be president, we need to change it. All those small political games. But when it comes to core fundamental things in the country, no one is willing to sit down and actually discuss. We had another change in 1994. Again, it was because some group wanted to block another group of, so they went and changed small part in small articles. And we've been living with those constitutions since the 1960s, since the colonial master gave us independence. And that's what how I'll phrase it.
So, to me, with this explanation, again, it boils down to the problems are our leaders,
Exactly.
because they do have the capacity to change and the authority to change or to amend the constitution that was given to them. In over 60 years now, some of them over 60 years, some over 50 years, some over 30 years, they're still yet to change the constitution to be beneficial to the common people. Yet, they will change or amend the constitution to fit their personal gain and personal interest. And still, we'll still believe that the Westerners, whether you say it is the Americans or China or any foreign country, are the problems of Africa.
There are not the problems. That
Africa,
we need again, we need strong leaders. Now,
yeah,
where there might be the problems though is, for example, If I today or if Mr. X today want to change the system, that political revolution, start talking and talking and talking, and then he started dragging people behind him. He started gaining momentum and all that stuff. All of a sudden, next thing you know, um, you see that some foreign investors and all that stuff. He wins like that guy win power. Two
Yeah.
years into thing, there is a coup d'état. People come, military, boom. They send special forces. That's what they did in Haiti. They sent special forces in Haiti. Maurice Juvenal was killed, and then we came back. There a report that some CIA member was part of it. Now, I'm just saying,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
because that leader is taking the direction somewhere that I don't like. So we do something about it. So to that extent, I would say maybe the house of, but we need to do our part. We need to do our part as Africans, as African leaders. Once we do our part, we find a ways to go around the rest of it. You can
okay.
kill one person by thinking multiple people at once.
Very quickly, in absence of democracy, what could be the alternative?
Well, I want to say because you know before democracy was brought to us, it's not as if we went ruling ourselves. People
Yes.
were just unruly, and it was just war. We had our own way of resolving issues, of giving power, every getting power, giving power, so on and so forth. We had our own ways of um, justice system, all that stuff,
Governance.
of governance. All those ways of governance, we have been trying to change it and get rid of them by imposing democracy, which is a foreign concept of governance. And not only did we do that, but we are not even using it or applying it thoroughly in its all entirety. We only apply a part of it that benefit us. The example that I gave was the example of the people to be able to sack the president they don't like him. So whether we want to have democracy and then we apply it properly, like how it's working in Western countries, or we don't and we go back to our traditional way of governance, which we involve more kings. In Nigeria, you guys call them sometimes Oba and all that. We involve more of these people into the resolvement of our own issues. If that's the way to go, that's the way to go. I am personally more in favor of a parliamentary system like it works in the UK, in South Africa, in India, in Japan. In the parliamentary system is representative. You don't have a president like the king that is voted, that is the king, the president of the country, and then he just giving rules by heart however he likes. In a parliamentary system like in the UK, the people, you have the election, every single region area elect the representative or whatever you call them. The majority wins, has a prime minister. The prime minister power is limited to a certain level. He can do certain things. There are certain things he cannot do. He has to come to the parliament, explain himself. If the parliament, which are the representative of the people, don't like the direction he's going, they have the right to call him to come and explain himself. If he explain himself, we are not satisfied as a parliament, we can sack him. That to me is what we need in Africa. That's the form of governance we need to Africa. We that power of we give one person all the power is not working for us and will not work for us. We need to have a parliamentary system where the people are represented equally and fairly, and they have the right to pick the leaders through those people. And maybe we'll have more peace. That's the way I look at it.
Okay, that is wonderful. Thank you very much, Benny. We have been here for nothing less than an hour. I would love to continue this conversation with you, and I would like to see you again. This is tons of information. A lot
Yes.
of people back home, both in diaspora, they don't have ideas or they don't have a hold of this information. We are here to liberate them. We are here to give them facts we are yet to change some of the mindsets of Africans. And I really hope we'll see you again.
Definitely.
And do you have any last word, last statement for the viewers?
Oh, but my last statement is I just wanna again tell our African brothers and sisters, um, it's time that we start caring for our own self. It's time that we start putting our own interest at the center of every single negotiation we do, trade. What is it in it for Africans, for my country, for my people? I am today, let's say for example, I am going to sign a contract of manganese in my village because my grandfather happened to have a land of manganese down there and I happened to inherit it. I've happened to meet with some Chinese people. They want to exploit it. That contract, I need to read it thoroughly to understand all the ins and outs. If I cannot read it, I need to hire lawyers that can help me understand it and protect every single aspect of that land. The result of the exploitation need to be surely and fairly divided so that it can benefit my people, my land. We need to start changing our mindset. Sometimes they'll come and they'll say, "Oh, I'll give you 2 billion," and we all happy we want 2 billions. If someone is willing to give you 2 billions for that, and that means that he's gonna make 20 billions. We have to open our mind and think long-term strategies. Long-term.
Hmm.
A recent
Thank
statistic recently that we had in Ivory Coast, I will finish on that. After the independence, Ivory Coast had 60% of the land was forest, pure forest. We had our independence in 1960. More than 60% was pure forest. That means like in the Amazon trees and everything.
Yes.
Today we have less than 19% of our land that is forest.
Wow. So, Bini, we can continue on this for the
So
next 30 minutes.
I know this is to say to show that our leaders that we've had never thought ahead of time when they were giving those land to be exploited. So now, fast forward 60 years later, we lost all that land. And it's not that we are thinking about replanting trees again.
Hmm.
We need to change the way we think. We need to change our mindset. As you are giving something, and what are you doing to replace it? How is the 60, 100-year generation going to survive after us? Let's not think about our own self today. Think about the future generation. So that's what I will leave it at. Thank you.
That is interesting. That is interesting. I can relate with that. Recently, Africa is planting trees around Africa. They call it the Wall of Africa. Um, like forest reserve is a big thing in Africa. There's no reservations. Few countries they just build without reserving
Hmm.
forest. Second aspect, these days you do not sell lands to foreigners. You don't sell lands. You lease them, regardless of the contract, whether they're going to give you billions or not. That you can lease them 20 years, 10 years, 15 years, 30 years. It still belong to the country and belong to the indigents of that country. I will leave it just like that for now for our viewers. Until we meet again, we'll be discussing about other subjects. But remember, Africa is the centric of our discussion.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Bini, for giving us your time. We
Thank you
can't
very much.
we can't repay you back for this time. We know how busy you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.